Hey guys, it's Sheriff from Woodshop Diaries, and in this video we are updating my parents' garage. As you can see behind me, it looks like it's a pretty blank slate, but here's the actual before. Plenty of space, not a lot of organization. So my goal with this project was to help them declutter by adding some practical organization and storage. So if you want to see how we transformed this blank slate, let's go. This video was sponsored by my friends at Mr. Cool. I'm updating my parents' garage here, but later in the video, I'll be sharing an update to my own shop that me and the shop pets are all pretty excited about. For now, let's take a look at the garage space that I'm working with. My parents built this house when I was in the 3rd grade, and this garage has gone through a lot of stages. But these walls have always been blank. The floor, however, has always been full, which is not ideal. This wall was about 9 foot long, and I didn't measure the ceiling, but I knew it was well over 8 foot tall. I also needed to take into account this little lip on the side here above the concrete blocks. My idea was to add a tall pantry cabinet in the back corner, a tool chest / workbench next to it with another storage cabinet above. I also needed to fill this extra space above the concrete blocks with something useful. Maybe add some pegboard, a tool battery charging station, and a place for their dog Hank's food bowls. So with the general plan in mind, I headed to the shop to get building. I started with the biggest piece first, the large pantry style cabinet. Now I shared the full building process for this pantry in my last video, so I won't go into all the details again here, but here are a few highlights. I made this cabinet a full 8 foot tall since I had the space for it, and my plywood was already 8 foot long. I divided it into 2 sections, a smaller section at the top and a larger section at the bottom. In my last video, I shared how I added some pull-out storage drawers and adjustable shelves in this cabinet. I figured that the pull-out drawers would be perfect for paint can storage in the garage, and adjustable shelves could be used for other odds and ends. Now, if you saw that video, you'll also see that I originally planned to have the upper section of the cabinet be a lift-up door. But once I got down off the ladder after installing it, I realized that I couldn't close it after it was lifted because I couldn't reach. Whoops. So I ended up cutting that door down and making it into 2 regular style doors for the top section. Anyway, you can go watch that video for more details on the pantry build. This cabinet was kind of the main anchor piece of the garage setup. It will go in the far corner. So next, I built this smaller upper cabinet that will go above the tool chest / workbench. The tool chest that I'm using here is actually my old one that I had promised my dad a while back, but he didn't have room for it at the time. So I made sure to include it in this update so that I could get it out of my shop and into his. Anyway, it was 56 inches long, so I made the upper cabinet here slightly longer at 57 inches. Okay, so I've got 2 top and bottom panels, 2 side panels, 2 slightly smaller divider panels, the bottom back support, and the 2 top back supports. I made it about 12 inches deep and 17 inches tall. I could have definitely made it taller, but I was just trying to make the best use of the materials that I had left. After all my pieces were cut, I sanded them, then drilled pocket holes into the ends of the top and bottom panels and the top supports. I assembled the cabinet using pocket holes and screws. But for the dividers, I just used some wood screws through the top and bottom to secure them. If you happen to see my mudroom cabinet video from last summer, this is almost exactly the same cabinet that I made for that. At the end of the day, most cabinets are pretty much the exact same thing. Anyway, I didn't add a back to this cabinet, but I did add a face frame. I assembled a basic frame from pre-primed 1x3s to attach onto the front. I actually didn't mean to make the entire thing from 1x3s. I meant to only use those for the top and bottom and then make the vertical pieces 1x2s. But I didn't realize what I had done here until I had already cut everything and screwed it together, so I just left it. Oh well. Then I glued and nailed the face frame onto the front of the cabinet. While that dried, I built the doors. This cabinet obviously has 3 sections, but I only added doors on the left and the right, and I just left the middle part open. So, just like I did with the pantry cabinet in my last video, I cut 2 pieces of 1/2-inch plywood for my doors and glued 1/4-inch plywood strips onto the front to kind of fake a frame and panel style door. At this point, the glue had dried on the face frame and the doors, so it was time to paint. I applied primer to the doors and the cabinets first. Then I painted them in Sherwin-Williams software because Dad wanted a gray color to match his car. After the paint had dried, I drilled hinge cup holes in the doors and installed the overlay hinges. Then I installed these onto the cabinet. Now that the cabinets are assembled, I want to take a moment to show you what's new in my workshop. You may have noticed this addition in the background of some of the footage that I've just shared. This is my new Mr. Cool ductless heat pump and air conditioning system. I've never had heat or air before in my workshop, and over the years, you guys have had a lot of questions about that. I've mentioned several times that I like working with the doors open in my workshop, and most of the time, it's not too bad. But there's always a few weeks, or sometimes months, that it would just be really nice to have the option to turn on some heat or AC if we needed it. In the summer, it gets pretty warm in here, and cooling it off at night for Bubs is always kind of a process. And in the wintertime, when it starts to get below freezing out here, I always have to carry all of my paints and stains inside. I was already familiar with the Mr. Cool ductless system because we installed one of these in our previous home. So I knew that's exactly what I wanted for my shop space. One thing I love about Mr. Cool is that it's a system that we can install ourselves. It's literally called the Mr. Cool DIY Multi-Zone. It comes in basically 2 pieces, the head that mounts on the wall and the unit that goes outside. By the way, we just installed the one, but if you had multiple rooms, you can install up to 5 zones per unit. The hardest part was literally arguing about how much water was too much water in the concrete mix that we poured for the outside unit to sit on. After we poured the slab and let it set up, we mounted the head of the unit inside on my shop wall. Then we mounted the outdoor unit to the slab with anchors. Then we ran the quick connect cables between the two, connected the power and the lines, opened the valves, and we were ready to test things out. Another thing that I really love about the Mr. Cool is that it's super easy to just turn it on, let it run for a bit, then turn it off. I think my absolute favorite feature though is that it connects to Wi-Fi, so I can control it from the app. This app tells me the current room temperature and it allows me to control it from anywhere, even if I'm away from home. I can even set up a timer to have it run for like 30 minutes, an hour and a half, an hour, whatever. Or, as is perfect for the summertime, I can set it up on a schedule so that it turns on, say, at 7:30 every night and then turns off at 9:30. That way we can cool this down for Bubs. I have used Mr. Cool in my home before, and I'm even more excited to have it now, again, in my workshop. If you're curious about adding a Mr. Cool to your home, workshop, or garage, check out all of the available models and their features on MrCoolDIY.com. All right, let's cool this place down. Okay, now that I've shown you what's new in my shop, let's head back to my parents' garage update. So my parents' garage has a weird, like, lip, kind of, where the concrete blocks on the side of the wall come up and then there's like a base plate. So I can butt this pantry cabinet up to the cement blocks, but then there's like a 4.5, 5-inch gap between the side of the pantry and the actual drywall. So I wanted to fill that space with something useful. I had some scrap 1/2-inch plywood. So I cut 2 10-inch strips. I'm gonna make this cabinet 10 inches deep. The cement blocks come up 26 inches off the ground. So I want this cabinet to go from that to the top of this pantry. So the pantry is 96 inches tall. If I subtract 26, that's 70. So I need to cut these strips 70 inches and those will be the sides. Then I'm gonna cut this thin strip in a few pieces to be like the little shelves. This little shelf will be the perfect size to store quart-sized paint cans, caulk, spray paint, or just other small odds and ends. It was just a really simple way to fill this awkward void next to the pantry and above the concrete blocks. I cut my plywood pieces down and just screwed them together, making sure to pre-drill each hole since this material was so thin. I just didn't want anything to split. The last piece that I needed to make before bringing this all over to my parents' house was a pegboard panel. I wanted to give my dad a place to hang his tools on the wall because I knew if I didn't, they would end up just piling up on the workbench. I had some leftover pegboard in my scrap pile already, so I cut down some thin plywood strips to make a frame to mount this to. I made this frame about 26 inches tall and 57 inches wide, which is the same width as the upper cabinet. And I assembled it with pocket holes and screws. Then I cut to fit a piece of pegboard to fit over the frame and I glued and screwed it onto the front. At this point, we loaded everything up and moved it to Mom and Dad's house to get it installed. We started installation by scooting the pantry cabinet in its place. Before securing, I slid the little cubby shelf next to it to rest on the blocks below. Then I screwed the pantry cabinet to the wall studs through the back supports. I also used a couple of screws through the side of the pantry to kind of tack the cubby shelf in place so that it won't slide back and forth. Then I located the wall studs next to the pantry and secured the pegboard frame to those. After that was in place, we could install the upper cabinet directly above it using screws through the back supports and into the wall studs. And finally, we rolled the workbench into its place and added the shelves back in the pantry. At that point, my parents were very eager for me to get out of the way so that they could start filling up the cabinets with stuff. They wasted no time in getting their things situated, and I'm just glad that they're excited. In the meantime, I had one more thing to add here, and that was a battery charging station. I had brought a scrap piece of plywood with me to Mom and Dad's house to mount all of their battery chargers onto. I arranged them so that they would all fit, then I mounted them one by one using some short wood screws. I used painter's tape to help me space the screws for each charger so that they would just easily slide in place. And after all of the chargers were on, I added a power strip and tried to organize the cords as best I could. I screwed this piece of plywood to a wall stud close to an outlet so that Dad can charge his batteries all in one place. He used to have these just scattered all over the garage, so I hope that this helps him keep things a little bit more organized and makes it a little easier for him. And with that, this garage looks like a brand new space. At least much better than the cluttered mess that they had before. I think my dad's pretty excited to have his own little corner of the garage to keep all of his car stuff, and I think my mom's happy everything's just finally neat and organized. And me and their dog Hank are just happy that they're happy. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this garage update and seeing it all come together. I've got tons more projects, even some more from my parents, coming soon, so be sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!